Welcome to One Thought at a Time with Ian Travers, where we get curious about what makes people tick. We're here today with a man, the name of his company really speaks for itself, which we'll hear more of. Welcome, Nick Butcher.
Thank you very much. I didn't realise the name spoke for itself.
Yes, well, I think Ignition Human Performance. So I guess it's something to do with that.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and it stems from a background in looking at people performance and HR.
Yes.
So I knew that it had to have human and performance in there somewhere.
There you go.
And working in the motorsport industry, Ignition kind of felt the right
thing to do.
Right thing to say, yeah.
Well, let's kick it off. I mean, we've spoken many times, trackside and all sorts, but let's start off the journey for those listening. Tell us, what do you do, Nick? What do you do now?
Yeah, so Ignition Human Performance, business I started about 5 years ago now. Left my corporate HR career, had a part-time business that looked at coaching and CV work. And wanted to give that a try. I just thought, I've got 6 months here probably. Why don't I just see if that works? And here I am 5 years later. Ultimately, though, it didn't have any of the motorsport influence that it's got now. That's developed over time. And really that was, I suppose, from two ways. One, when you're talking to people, it's so much more easier to engage them when you're talking about something that they actually feel passionate about. And also it keeps the interest in for me as well.
Which is important,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. You can look into a topic that you've looked at your whole life, and actually when I look back at when I've looked at sport or motorsport, I've always been interested in the business side of it and really establishing those lessons. So with that and the fact that all the F1 teams have event space, we can run leadership teamwork courses there. And we can also get people from the industry then to go and speak to the different clients that we have to really bring that, get behind the pit wall, as we say, and bring that to life.
And we keep bumping into each other at race weekends because you're involved in the touring cars.
That's right. Yeah. So we're involved with Mark Blundell Motorsport, which, as it says on the tin, is former F1 driver Mark Blundell's touring car team.
Yeah.
He was one of the reasons actually why I was able to get credibly into motorsport. So a bit of my background is I was in the automotive, I left school and went into the automotive industry. Mm-hmm. And I think when I was looking at how to stylize out the business and what does this business mean, the one piece of advice I got was, well, you need a niche. It's always good to have a niche, a subject to talk into. And from an automotive background, I thought, well, great. That's, I'll try and appeal to the automotive world. I'll make them my clients, sort of thing. And actually, at the time, we were working a lot with Mark's management company, MB Partners, who managed different racing drivers through lots of different series, from F2 to DTM to touring cars. And actually, it was sitting down with him and his operations director, Alex, and saying, and they said, well, what about motorsport? This is an industry where there are a lot of, outside of Formula One, there's a lot of industries, a lot of small teams. And so really, that was when Ignition sort of took off and started utilising the lessons from motorsport. And it became less about working with the teams themselves and actually more about different clients from different industries saying, well, I want to know what they're doing there. So what we're doing with MB Motorsport now, we're their business performance partner. And effectively that is where they have and are trying to get sponsorship on the car, rather than just being a sticker on the car. It's actually, well, what does this mean for my business? I'm investing in Mark's team. That's great. We go to Brands Hatch, we go to Donington, we have a nice lunch, we meet Mark, we meet the drivers. But actually, when you go back to the office, what does it actually mean for the culture of the business? So what we're doing with the team is effectively running events, working with their partners to unlock that culture, unlock that performance. So suddenly, you have a much better return on investment when you're going into, when you're entering the partnership with MB. And that's actually something then we're running with other teams as well, you know. So
that's
in different
so
series.
effectively when someone is sponsoring, you're enhancing effectively the sponsor's return on their investment commitment to it. It's
you know, what is that going to mean for someone who works in the accounts department? You know, what does it mean for the sales team? How are they working better together? How are they communicating? How are they better leaders in business? How are they working together as a team? How can we utilise the lessons from a pit stop and how they work together over a couple of seconds to actually then put that into said partners' team themselves?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I know many of the conversations I've had with people on this is one of the highest barriers to any entry at whatever level, club racing or whatever, is sponsorship. You know, and getting a sponsor to realise, you know, that you know, a few £100 for a sticker on a car. No, it's more than that. You know,
we're asking for more now as business owners. You know that, I know that, and I think it's important also to get the team and the drivers to understand that as well.
Yeah.
In terms of ultimately, if businesses are not willing to sponsor the race car or whatever level, and that goes to the top of Formula One. It's a bigger numbers, but you still have to showcase a return on investment for that client. Effectively, they become your client, partner or client, however you want to call it. A bit of brand recognition just isn't good enough anymore, quite frankly. So that's very much on that side. And then what we do with our other clients from other industries is effectively what we are seeing on the racetrack. We can again help unlock in their business, and it's a very relatable, you know, motorsport and high performance sport as well. It's very relatable. People see it on a Sunday and we can teach it on a Monday ultimately.
That's brilliant. I like that. So how did you get there? What was your journey to get you to this?
Well, a couple of years ago someone once said that I was talking to them and they said, "Oh, you're self-made," and I still haven't quite worked out what the last word of that is. It's been a very interesting journey. I left school with not a lot. School and I didn't really get on, and as I said earlier, I went into the car industry at 17. I'd always wanted to be in the car industry. I'd always liked things with three wheels since I was 2 years old. And that was really interesting because what I saw in the car industry, working on the shop floor selling cars, ultimately was you were dealing with the person buying their first car and their last car and everything in between. You were spoken to in many, many different ways, whether that was very nicely or very poorly. And I think that really got me an understanding of people and interacting with people and dealing with people, you know, at all sort of levels, stakeholder and gate levels, that sort of thing. So that was almost like my apprenticeship, and I was very lucky to work for a small Seat dealership in Hampton Court. They had another one in Wimbledon as well. And ultimately, I think the business was about 25 people. And the MD there sort of took me under his wing and really showed me what it was like to run a business. You know, I was probably 18, 19 at that point. So that sort of got the motorsport. And actually what was nice, being at Seat at that time, it's when they had the Leon Cupras in the touring cars as well. So we did a lot on the motorsport side. So that was good as well. Nice how you can link that back to now when I'm doing the bits with MB Motorsport. But from that, I kind of felt that was my apprenticeship and I wanted to see what else I could do. So I remember I was probably about 23 at the time, and I just decided that there was something else there for me, or at least let's go and have a look and I can fall back if necessary. Because I was having a good career in the car industry and, you know, and probably would have very happily continued in that. There was just almost a little itch. I just wanted to see if there was something else. And I wanted to work Monday to Friday as well. I'm very, very honest. And so I remember sitting down with my dad one day, who had a very successful career in HR, and you know, and he got to the very top, you know, sort of at worldwide level. And I thought, well, I'm going to ask him if he thinks I'd be any good at HR. Now, at that point, I didn't really know what HR meant, or I just know that my dad had been successful in it, if you like. And so I remember we sat down, we went for dinner in Kingston one night and sat down. I said to him, well, Dad, do you think I'd be any good in HR? And I thought he'd turn around and say, well, Nick, you need this degree, that degree,
Yeah.
just stick to sales, basically. And he didn't. He said, I think you'd be really good in HR, Nick, because you got common sense. And that's actually the best piece of advice anyone's ever given me.
That's brilliant.
And what I've kept through my career as I've gone through the sort of the HR ladder. And what he meant by that was ultimately, how would you like to be treated? Always go back to what the contract says, what does the handbook say, and apply common sense to it. And as I say, that sort of key foundation is really built into my HR career. Of course, saying that at an interview then...
So tell me, what are your strengths?
There was a couple of months there. There was a couple of months, common sense, well, great.
Yeah.
There was a couple of months there where obviously then I had to go and get into HR and eventually I had a 1 week's work experience with Veolia Environmental Services. And effectively that turned into 5 years of employment.
Brilliant.
And again, that was on a bit of an off chance, a bit of an opportunity. I'd actually been offered, interestingly, and you and I spoke about this earlier, off camera, about decision points in life. That same week that I got offered the week's work experience at Veolia, I also got offered my old job back in the car industry.
Wow.
And it was very difficult to turn that down with the sort of it'll be a step up for you, And I'm going, well, I don't want to do that. I want to go and do a week's work experience. And again, talking to my boss, who I respected a lot, and turning around, and I was really, so you're coming back, Nick, yeah. And I turned around and said, no, I think I've got to go and take this opportunity.
So you mentioned about there being this itch that you needed to scratch. There was this something. What do you think? What was that something? That what was it? Do you think that swayed you to go for the work experience and not go back to the place that you would probably have earned a good wage from?
No, absolutely. I think it's something that it's not necessarily about the next thing and moving on to the next thing or being indecisive. It's just almost that kind of what would make you, what would make me happy, or what do I want to achieve in life? And that's taken many different views over the last, if you'd have said to me, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, the business for a long time now, but say 7 years ago when I was head of HR for a tyre wholesaler, if you'd have said to me, well, your career now will be outside of HR, you're not doing, yes, you've got that element to it, but you're on more the training and development side. Yeah, I mean, I've done training and development before, but I'd probably be quite surprised that I didn't take the next step to HR director and so forth, sort of thing. I just think sometimes you've got to take the opportunities that are presented and just roll with it and see how it goes.
Yeah.
And ultimately, and I say this without sounding too sort of carefree or anything, but what's the worst that can happen? And I think that's something that when I speak to different people within motorsport and that side of things, you realise that actually everyone who's achieved something has taken a risk. And I think ultimately, what's the worst that could happen? Well, with the car industry side of things, a week's work experience doesn't work out. Okay, that's a shame, but I've tried it.
Yeah.
So worst case scenario, what do? I ring up my old boss. Now he might turn around to me and say, sorry, Nick, but opportunity was on the table. It's not there anymore. But there might be another opportunity in the car industry with the experience that I had. So was I going to walk away from that and be unemployed for the rest of my life? Well, no.
It's really interesting, this, isn't it? I was one of my other podcast guests was talking about the role that fear plays in a lot of our decision making, and a lot of us, whilst we might overtly be responding to it, but why don't you take that new opportunity? Well, we're afraid of what someone might think, what someone might say. I might not be able to do it, all that kind of stuff. Well, whereas I think it's taking that step, isn't it? That following that itch that needs,
I think sometimes,
scratching.
absolutely. And I think sometimes, I've been through a lot of redundancy situations on the side of making the redundancy. I've done a lot of change management and restructures in business. And they're not nice situations to be in. You don't want to be in that position where effectively what you're saying on a, usually a Friday evening is affecting that person's life ultimately. But there's also something that if you drag that out, that's very unfair on that person, because actually, and you see it with when you sit there and you sit on the other side of the table and you say, look, unfortunately, for whatever reason, this role is no longer working for the business and, it can't go forward. You get the responses of, oh, how am I going to pay my mortgage? I've never done anything else, And it's very interesting when we now with LinkedIn, we see where people have ended up and things like that. And I'm not saying it's not a big thing, but it's incredible where people end up and where people have turned around and said, well, I've worked here for 20 years. I'll never be able to do anything else. Well, you can, ultimately. That's not...
It's not written in a book anywhere, is it?
No. Why are you at that desk in the first place, almost?
Yeah.
And I think that's... And as I say, I don't agree with people changing their jobs every 5 minutes, but I think sometimes it's good for people to see what they can do and have a change. And actually, what's nice about sort of the environments that Ignition work in, Thinking It Better work in, is you're working with people who have taken those risks, and you've got the stories there of people who said, do you know what? I was down to my last pound, I decided to do this, and now I've achieved this.
It's really interesting. Conversations as well. If you go right back to the start, you were saying, and I'm sure many people listening to this will be in a similar position. They say, well, it's kind of me and school didn't agree.
Yeah. And that was joking aside, I remember getting my GCSE results where I got 1C and 6 Ds. It wasn't good, let's put it that way. And I'd almost been geared to, that was fate, that was it, at 16 years old, that was it, life over. Wow, okay, thanks very much. What do I do now, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But that mentality really stuck with me for a long time, where you have that, the first few jobs, and you do, you go through a first relationship breakup as a teenager and that sort of things. And by 18, I was sort of like, right, school's failed, relationships failed. I did a weekend job at a restaurant, and that didn't work out. It wasn't a weekend job. It was meant to be longer than a weekend, but it worked out for a weekend. Oh my God, can I not do anything, sort of thing? And I think actually it was going into when I joined the Seat dealership, Spur Garage, and I'd been at a dealership in Walton beforehand, very nice dealership, Aston Martin dealership, for a couple of months, and they went through a restructure. Now, that wasn't my fault that I left, but obviously after you've been in a business for 3 months and you've just come out of school and suddenly someone turns around to you on exactly that redundancy conversation we've been talking about, and they say, sorry Nick, the site's moving over there and we're not taking you, basically last in first out. All right. It was going then to Spur Garage and actually having someone believe in me and saying, yeah Nick, I can see something in you here, right? And that's what I think, where I've been very fortunate in my career, was my boss at Spur Garage at the Seat dealership, and then going into Veolia and having that week's work experience, actually never starting that week's work experience because they'd already seen in the interview they wanted to put me on a 3-month contract.
Yeah.
Going into that, then having the HR director of the business then saying, I remember going to my HR manager and again, what have I got to lose by saying, I'm actually really enjoying this 3-month contract. If there's any opportunity of a full-time job, I'd be interested, no more, no less. And I remember having that conversation with my then boss, and she said, well, that's really interesting, you should say that. the HR director wants you to work for him for a year. and that was a guy called Dan, and he just turned around to me and said, well, you want to get into HR, Nick? I'm the HR director. We'll get, what projects do you want to get involved in? So I had this really broad start to my career of just different projects, that whether it was a TUPE project or a learning and development project, and really saw lots of aspects of HR. And again, it's those, when I look back at my career, it's those two people, whether it be Chris at Spur Garage or Dan at Veolia, that really just gave me an opportunity.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I wonder, the way that it's developed for you is you got to that position of, well, what have I got to lose? I'll ask. And I wonder how different that was from the 16-year-old who looked at the exam results. Probably wouldn't have asked.
No, exactly.
So
it's about confidence, ultimately.
Confidence and a bit of self-belief.
It is. And I think that's something that I've taken into business now is, ultimately all you have to do is go and ask the question. The worst thing that can be said is no. And I've heard a lot of no's.
Yeah.
I can look at it now after 5-6 years in business and say, oh, well, overall I'd say the business has been successful.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of no's along the ways, and it's the few little yeses that you get that are actually mean quite a lot, and you work with them, and it takes you to the next level, takes you to the next level.
And there's an interesting thing, isn't there? You mentioned the word success as well. I mean, what success means is actually quite difficult, isn't it, as well?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, no. And I think, take the COVID period, for example. Financially, for the business, COVID was terrible. It cut everything back. You'll know this, that ultimately it went from, our USP is hosting live training events at Formula One venues with people.
Yes.
It doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out in COVID. That didn't happen.
Yeah, no F1, no venues, no people.
So I really made quite a conscious decision early on in that, which was just be a decent human being. Just literally where you can help people, help.
Yeah.
Where, I don't know, it was just, and what I found with that actually is I took a pretty much a year away to understand what Ignition actually was. It had a lot of, good potential and lots of good conversations and lots of good people involved. But one of the early things I did is our first ever client was a charity called Halo Project, which is a charity based down in Guildford in Surrey that works with young adults who have learning disabilities like Down syndrome, autism.
Yeah.
And as I say, they were our first ever client that, again, asked the question. I messaged the CEO saying, we'd really, on a charitable side of our business, we'd really like to do interview workshops and CV writing skills with the young people. And she turned around and said, oh, do you do leadership training as well? And I said, well, yeah, I can do that. So that was a really nice into the, an opportunity of just sending out an email and getting a bit of business in. So leaving my HR role in 2017, within a week, I had my first bit of work lined up, which was great. And we've had a great relationship with this charity ever since, to the point now that I'm a trustee on their board. Yeah. So, but during COVID, obviously I knew the charities were going to be hit quite badly. And Halo Project, there's a motorsport connection with that because it's Damon Hill's charity, the 1996 Formula One world champion. And every year we have the Damon Hill karting day with Halo down at Sandown Park, and we raise money. And I'd got Damon's phone number about 2 years beforehand. And I just thought to myself, actually, they're going to be wanting to raise money. I can put together a training event, and let's see if we can just sell some tickets to this with me talking to Damon about the mindset of a champion. Yeah. And that was very early on in lockdown. Again, did I think Damon was going to go and turn around and say, I met this guy 2 years ago. I just thought I wouldn't get a response, or I'd get a thanks but no thanks. And a couple of days later, he rang me. And I suddenly had on my phone, Damon Hill calling. I thought, God, 10-year-old Nick would like this. But compose yourself, Nick. Compose yourself.
10-year-old Nick would like this. Yeah, absolutely.
And so we talked through it. And he went, yeah, let's do it, sort of thing. And that was, so on that off chance of a yes, there's probably 5% chance of a yes. But actually, probably there was more, because I'd worked with a charity for then what had been 2-3 years. So I was a known quantity. I'm sure he rang up the charity and said, who's this guy ringing me up?
Yeah.
Oh, it's Nick, he's all right. Oh, okay, then I'll call him back, sort of thing. But again, that really then, so we go back to the subject of what does success look like? Well, crudely, that looked very successful when I had a Formula One world champion say, almost, working with me, giving me his own seal of approval, helping his charity, and that generated a lot of conversations.
And this is the thing that always fascinates me when we have conversations like this. So all of this, talking to people, F1 champions, inspiring and engaging people, from the person who looked at their GCSE results and thought it's over.
Yeah,
I mean that's a massive journey, isn't it?
It's when I'll probably look back on it one day. But it is it's something that it just shows that anyone could do anything.
Have you come across people that you think don't have what it takes to succeed?
It's a really difficult one, that, because you probably don't know the person well enough to know whether they can or can't succeed. What is that for me to say? I might come across someone and they might make a really bad impression on me, or I might have worked with them and thought, no, they need to work on this, this, and this. And I don't believe that everyone is destined to be an entrepreneur, an MD, or an Instagram influencer, or whatever. I don't necessarily believe that. I think everyone, you've got to find something you're good at. Otherwise we'd all be the same. And so I don't.
Absolutely
So what
agree.
is success? That's the thing, isn't it? What is success? And I think, again, you can. When I was at Veolia, we obviously used to do, it was 5 businesses, but one of those was the environmental services businesses, which was effectively waste collection. Now, every year we used to run an awards ceremony. So effectively, if they'd done an apprenticeship or an NVQ, and we're only talking level 1, level 2. So this is the equivalent of probably GCSE, going up to GCSE level. I think level 2 is, might be wrong there, but we were rewarding them. We were getting them across the stage. We were flying in the CEO from France, the big CEO of a multinational worldwide business, and to them, having not gone through their own university degree, I remember one of them coming up to me and just saying, "Well, this is the greatest day. I'm so proud of myself.
Amazing.
I've achieved something."
Yeah.
So success to them was different to success that I might perceive. Now, I left, as I say, I left school with nothing. 5 years ago, I completed my international HR management degree at Kingston University. I got to walk across the stage. And that really was something that I said, well, if I can do that, anyone can do anything. Because me and it just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
And it wasn't easy, but bit by bit, and by knowing the subject as well, I played to my strength. I was able to get a degree off the back of it.
Yeah.
So it's something that I don't believe. I think we can all be successful in our own fields. We just got to find our own fields.
And what success means is not the same to everyone, and it's not points make prizes, is it?
No. If I log on to LinkedIn and they're telling me that one of their people, one of the young people that we've worked with on their CVs has got themselves a job, it's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah.
That's success.
Yeah.
I'm working with a young driver at the moment in GB4, so the equivalent of Formula 4. Last week we got the Halo brand on the side of his car. It's brilliant, so that's really successful to me. So sometimes, don't get me wrong, money makes the world go round, but there are plenty of other successes, and I think it's really important actually when as we said earlier, I've had the opportunity to speak to some people that I really never thought I'd speak to, and you've got to be careful not to be blasé about that. You almost have to sort of sit there and reflect sometimes, and not just, it was fine, we had a good time, but I made a mistake on that one line that I said, and hurt yourself on that one,
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
you're like, well, think about that opportunity, and again, go back to what 10-year-old Nick would have said. And I think that's the one thing that I say with Ignition Human Performance is, when I think back to, if someone had said back in 2017, here, are you going to sign up? This is what will happen. Will you sign up to that? I'd go, yeah. That sounds really great. You know, I get to go to touring. We get to go to touring cars and do business and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, I'll sign up to that.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, that's a really nice side of what we're doing, and I think that's success.
That's brilliant.
You know, on that.
Now that leads me on very nicely to my last question.
All right.
Which is, let's just make the assumption that we've conquered time travel.
Okay. Now that would be successful.
Okay. You could write yourself a note in a sealed envelope that you would leave somewhere for younger Nick to find.
Yeah.
What would you write to yourself, knowing what you know now?
It's a tricky one, because I always believe in sort of no regrets, and it's part of the journey, and what's meant to be is meant to be. You know, if I'm not meant to get a client, or if, you know, you go, well, fair enough, it's not meant to be, sort of thing. There's another part of me that says, actually, I wish in my earlier years I'd probably been a little bit more, you know, we said about the opening the GCSE results. I wish I'd have questioned that a bit more, as in, what, you know, why didn't that work? Because actually we've not covered this, and we probably, but I found out at 26 I was dyslexic.
Right.
So what, you know, so you kind of think, well, if I'd have questioned that a bit more rather than blame myself,
Right.
I actually might have found out earlier that I was dyslexic, and then got the tools to help that. However, would that mean that I was the same person now and brought that to me today? No. So I'd probably just say, keep your head down, keep on going, and, you know, when you get a setback, just dust yourself off, stand up again, and keep on going.
Brilliant. Love it.
Yeah.
That's great.
Thank you.
Nick, it's been a great conversation, and I'm sure we'll be having many more
sure
majors,
we will.
not, you know, across a microphone. So there you go. That has been One Thought at a Time with Ian Travers and our guest this time, Nick Butcher. I hope you've enjoyed what you've listened to. If you want to reach out to Nick or myself, you can find out how to do that in the comments of this. If you've enjoyed it, please like and share, and please do investigate, if you haven't done so already, some of our other really, really interesting and exciting conversations with our guests. Thanks very much.